So, Rabbi Say, wonderful to see everybody. The last time we met, a couple of weeks ago, we were discussing the end of Is Aleph in the Hagdama for Rav Kook's Shabbos Ha'Aretz, and we spoke about the relationship between Klal and Prat, and Klal and Prat and Klal. The relationship largely between general and specific, which is Klal and Prat, but more importantly, the interdependence of these two things. That the Klal cannot survive without the Prat cannot survive without the Klal. As we saw in the Shlach HaKodesh, Prat tzorech leKlal, Klal tzorech lePrat. At this point, Rav Kook pivots to an understanding how this specifically applies to the relationship that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as individuals and as a community, as a nation, and the interdependence of us as individuals on Klal Yisrael in order to be able to have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Please God, this afternoon, the goal is to get through Oz Beis and to see a essential and important Orach Chaim HaKadosh, as well as a piece of Rav Kook in Aris HaTshuva. We're going to go a little quicker through this chelek, simply because, and we'll come back to some of these themes a number of times over, because stopping and starting here won't help us too much. It'll be worth it to see the whole thing as a klal, and then we'll get to the pratim. You see what I did there? So Rav Kook begins Oz Beis here with Kimi Goy Gadol Asher Loi Elokim Krevim Elav. Who says those words? Moshe Rabbeinu, right? This is in Parashas Vayeschanan, in the fourth parak of Sefer Dvarim. Ki mi goy gadol asher loi elokim krevim elav. Who is so great, such a great nation, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so close to us. Let's see if we have a chumash here. Let's see if we have one. Thank you. We'll see that inside in a moment, because the psukim before and after are going to be important as well. Says Rav Kook as follows: Skulasa shel Knesset Yisrael he. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Skulasa, the uniqueness, the importance, the beauty of Klal Yisrael. Here we go. The beauty of Knesset Yisrael he, shehi mistakeles al ha'avaya kula ba'aspaklaria ha'meira shel kodesh. Now, all of these words require a lot of explanation, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises us, "V'atem tiyuli mamlechas kohanim v'goy kadosh, u'vazet yeh skula mikol ha'amim." That's how the Sfarna told us. We're going to be a skula mikol ha'amim. We will have some uniqueness. That's really what skula means, some specialness, a uniqueness to some degree. Skula social Knesset Yisrael, the specialness of the Jewish people, shehi mistakeles al ha'avaya kula, is that we collectively look at reality ba'aspaklaria ha'meira shel kodesh, with an aspaklaria ha'meira. What does that mean, an aspaklaria ha'meira? Clear lens. Shel kodesh. So kodesh is a hard word to translate. What does the word kodesh mean? So the Ramban writes that the word Kodesh means Parush Muvdal, separated and elevated. Mary Rabbi Blachman likes to translate the word Kedusha as transcendence. That's Parush Muvdal, that which is separated and elevated. It's not just separated, that's Havdalah, right? Aliyah means elevated, Kedusha means both. It's a good child. It's a good child. So in that, so that's the opposite, meaning that's separated and denigrated. It's a good child, and the Rishonim asked that question. So you're saying good, but not for now. But Bichlal, the notion of Kedusha is that which is Parush and Muvdal. It's also, the Ramban points out that any time that you find the notion of Kedusha, you also find the notion of Perush, but Isur. Whenever there is more Kedusha, there is more Isur. Isur, prohibition. anything that has more kedusha has a greater level of isur, right? Meaning, a kohen is more mekudesh than a Levi or a Yisrael. So a kohen has more isurim, and a kohen gadol has weiter more isurim, and a nazir kohen gadol has weiter more isurim, right? And is more susceptible to tum, right? And the more kaddish you are, the more you are susceptible to tum. That doesn't mean that there is necessarily more tumah, but certainly more susceptibility to tumah, meaning tumah will affect you even at smaller and smaller percentages of tumah, so to speak. The more mekudesh something is, which is why kachim are more susceptible to tumah than kachim kalim, for example. The same is true as we spoke about olam shana and nefesh, right? So a regular day of the week is called chol, right? That's called chol. That is that which is not mekudesh. Shabbos has before that, Yom Tov has a higher level of kedusha than Shabbos, than chol. Shabbos has a higher level of kedusha than Yom Tov, and Yom Kippur has a higher level of kedusha. That's why it's called Shabbos Shabbosai, right? So not in Aliyah's to the Torah, no, right? Not in Aliyah's to the Torah. But there is a greater level of kedusha. The more that there is Yisurim, the same is true Olam Shana and Nefesh. The same is true in Mekomis, right? The Kodesh Hakadoshim is that which is the most Mekudash in place has the most Yisurim. But Ha'aspeklaria Me'ira Shel Kodesh. So that's what the notion of kedusha means. What's the opposite of kedusha, by the way? Chol. No, that's the absence of kedusha. Tum. So the Medrash Rabbah points out, this Medrash Rabbah in Bereshis, that the opposite of kedusha is not tum. That's tahara. Tum and tahara. Bracha. 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 Why? Because kedusha means isur. Kedusha means isur. The opposite of that is bracha. Is heter. It's heter. You're looking at me quizzically. Good. Bracha. Baruch. Correct. So I'll explain. Kedusha means that which is separate from our engagement. Our engagement is more and more limited with that thing. Bracha means that we have more and more engagement with that thing. So, for example, the Gemara in Bracha says that if you eat from this world, ma'al. It says if you took from kedusha, you took from that which is kadosh without a heter. What's the heter? It's the bracha. It's the bracha. The Medrash Rabbah says about Shabbos, Vayivarech Elokim es yom hashvi'i vayikadesh esai. Vayivarech Elokim es yom hashvi'i, that the man would fall double on Erev Shabbos, vayikadesh esai. It didn't fall on Shabbos. Bracha means ribui. That's the notion of bracha. Harbei. Livarech is to make more of, to make more accessible. To be mekadesh something means to make it less accessible. So whenever we want to bring something into the world of our usage, we make a bracha. That means that we can have some level of accessibility with it. Which is why a person that eats without a bracha is as if they are taking from that which is kadosh. It's not for our usage. It is taken away from our usage. Now, the philosophers refer to this, and we'll see this in Rav Kook, a significant amount. I think Kantian philosophy, they refer to this as HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We refer to Hashem as being HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh meaning transcendent, elevated. Parush Muvdal, inaccessible. Baruch meaning immanent. There's immanence and transcendence. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is both way above anything that we can understand. He is Kadosh, 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 the most Mekudosh that you could ever have in the world. He's also Baruch. He's incredibly relevant and imminent in our lives. We realize HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here, is Noichach. We daven to Hashem in Lashon Noichach. Baruch Ata. Say Yud to the Rebbeinu Shalom. HaKadosh Baruch. So what's who? What does who mean? So the Gra points out. The Gra points out whenever you have the Lashon of who means that which we have no idea how to understand. It means that which is not here now. I'm referring to something that is not Noichach. It's not first person, it's not second person, it's there. HaKadosh Baruch, Hashem is both Kadosh and he is Baruch. How? Who? That's him. I don't know. By me, I can either be, meaning something can either be by me, Kadosh or Baruch. Either I can access it or I can't access it. The Rebbeinu Shalom can be both accessible and inaccessible simultaneously. He's both Kadosh and Baruch. But the way that a Jew looks at the world is the Asbaklaria Ma'ira Shel Kodesh. It's through a lens which provides us with a perspective of Kodesh, that everything is transcendent, that everything belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that everything is part of the world of Hashem. Very briefly, what does the notion of Asbaklaria Me'ira mean? Asbaklaria Me'ira means through a clear lens. What's the opposite of an Asbaklaria Me'ira? Asbaklaria Shein Me'ira. Who sees the world with an Asbaklaria Me'ira? Only Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Only Moshe Rabbeinu sees the world through an Asbaklaria Me'ira. So the pasuk says about Moshe Rabbeinu that Hashem speaks to him Panim el Panim. Panim el Panim. Panim el Panim. That means face to face. Hashem speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu face to face. Moshe speaks to Hashem face to face. As the person speaks Ish el Re'ehu. That's what the pasuk says. Moshe Rabbeinu is unique in that aspect. No one else gets to do that. But all of the other Nevi'im, how do they see HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What does it mean, Asbaklaria in Me'ira?
So clear.
In the Marei or Cholim, the highest of the Nevi'im see HaKadosh Baruch Hu as what? This is important. How's Yechezkel see HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Ma'aser Merkava, how does he see HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Correct, but what is that vision? So he says, it's true that we shouldn't, certainly me, I'm not on the peg grade to understand the Ma'aser Merkava, but you have to understand Pshat in the words of Tanakh, right? So the Nevi'im see HaKadosh Baruch Hu as an Adam Yoshev al Kisei, right? Of course it's a metaphor. Of course it's a metaphor. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's Aleph Beis in the Rambam. But why is it that the vision is an Adam Yoshev al Kisei? So the Shalach HaKadosh explains that that's Pshat in Asbaklaria She'ena Me'ira. Because if I have a window that is totally clear, I can see from one side to the other. But if the window is not so clear, then what do I see? You see a shtickle reflection. You see partially what's on the other side and partially your own reflection. So all of the Nevi'im saw HaKadosh Baruch Hu through their own interpretation to a certain extent. Right? It was filtered through them. Moshe Rabbeinu was chad v'chalak. Moshe Rabbeinu saw HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kivyachol, he understood HaKadosh Baruch Hu without his own interpretation of any events. B'Shem Yishmael writes that this is because Moshe Rabbeinu was Anav Mikol Adam. He had no ego. So when Moshe Rabbeinu saw Nevuah, he saw it the same as all the Nevi'im reflected through himself, but Moshe Rabbeinu had absolutely no ego. He was Anav Mikol Adam. So that which was reflected back to him was just what was on the other side of the window, which is Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah. Now what Rav Kook is saying here, and the reason that I point this out, is that Knesset Yisrael, she mistakeles al ha'avaya kula ba'asbaklari ha'me'ira shel kodesh, is that Knesset Yisrael, our uniqueness, is that we, not on an individual level, that's up to Moshe Rabbeinu, but on a national level, have the capacity to see the world through a clear lens, meaning as HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to see it. That's what Klal Yisrael, Knesset Yisrael, is capable of. Meaning, Every nation looks at the world through what they are trying to achieve, through what their goals are. Every nation looks at a plot of land, national resources, at technological innovation, and says, what do I want to do with this thing? Klal Yisrael looks at all of the same things and says, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want me to do with this thing? That's the Aspeklaria Me'ira Shel Kodesh. We look at it as HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to look at it. That's the unique segula of our people, which, if you remember from a few shiurim ago, we described that that's the difference between Adam and Ha'adam, right? Atem kriyim Adam, we are the Adam that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put into this world, la'ovda'u l'shemra, to be able to do what we need to do with this world. That's our tafkid. The rest of the world does stuff. They do things. And some of them are wonderful things, very good things. But that's not the tachlis and tafkid of what it means to be an Adam. That's what it means to be ha'adam, humanity as a whole. But that's not the tafkid of why HaKadosh Baruch Hu put human beings on earth. To that end, we have a unique capacity of seeing the world through a perspective that nobody else can see. When we look at the world, it is filtered as it's supposed to be. Now this is tough. He says, with all the strength of our life, our nation recognizes that life, as we know it, and we're going to define what Chaim means when we get to the Orach Chaim HaKadosh in a bit, that life is valuable only in correlation to how godly it is. That the value of our existence, of being alive, is in direct correlation to how meaningful our life is, and meaning is ascribed to by the Bari Olam. On a national level, we recognize that life is worth living if it is the life that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to live. We're going to define and explain what that is in a little bit. It says, life that is not godly is not worth living. Now, in one sentence here, Rav Kook has explained a whole world of Jewish philosophy. Very difficult, right? Yes.
I'm wondering to myself now, I have a different take on the concept of shooting on the Torah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if anyone was absolutely. None of us can get to that, but shooting on the Torah is the key term here. Shooting means that everybody here can get to it differently, but I guess one of them is not the same as the absolute, but it's okay.
Right.
Shooting on the Torah, they don't understand the definition.
Yes. Shivim Panim La Torah, meaning there are 70 faces of Torah, means that there are, when you look through that mirror and it is then through that lens that, and you say, yeah, 100%. Not for now, but if you take a look at the Perush Hagra to the 5th parak of Pirkei Avos, and the Maharal in the beginning of his parish on Avos and Derech Chaim, so that notion is expressed. That's the Shivim Zakenim that was supposed to go up to Har Sinai with Moshe Rabbeinu, and it didn't work out. What Rav Kook is taking note of here is that as a klal, not as individuals. As individuals, this is sometimes very hard to see. But as a klal, the Jewish people feels that our existence is worthwhile only in as much as it is godly. Now, he's making a statement of fact, but he's also making a very deep comment on the times that he's living in. Rav Kook is living through a massive wave of abandonment of Torah and mitzvahs. The Jews are trying every single patent in Europe, from converting to Christianity, to atheism, to Haskalah, to early Zionism, in order to find meaning in their life and are not being matzliach in doing so. They're not being successful. Everybody is starting what they would refer to as the isms, right? The Zionism and the communism and the socialism. All of the isms that were everywhere in Europe at the late 1800s, early 1900s, the whole world was filled with isms. None of them satisfied a Jewish soul. None of them satisfied a klal. Nobody came out of that saying, this is great. This is now the new mahalech of Yadus. We have now solved the problems. And he's making this point, it's not so veiled in other places, but he's saying it very clearly here, meaning understanding where he's coming from, is that a Jew knows, and Klal Yisrael for sure knows, that as a whole, we do not have a meaningful existence devoid of godliness. And the more that our life is ruchani and eloiki, the more that it is meaningful, and the less that it's ruchani and eloiki, the less that it is meaningful. And he says that reality is baked into the mission and the nature of Klal Yisrael. There's no way around it. Yeah.
It goes beyond Judaism. It goes to the whole world.
That's true. But whereas other nations can subvert that ikar of life is supposed to be ruchani and put in its place some other system of values and find meaning in that, we cannot.
Is that also why Hasidim also get that period also not
So Hasidus was not so much a attempt to find something different from Yiddishkeit. It was trying to find meaning within Yiddishkeit. It was a return to that, yes. That's true. Although, I mean, Rav Kook is at the tail end of these isms in Europe. They started...
Hasidut was a reflection of the exclusivity of Torah yeshiva world where the other people were excluded.
100%.
So they decided they're just as good as you are, and they created a way of being just as good as
So you're 100% right, and we're going to see, because Rav Kook straddles the line of world of Hasidim and Misnagdim, meaning his father was a Talmud in Volozhin. He was a Talmud in Volozhin, and his mother was a Lubavitcher Chassid. He said his claim to fame was that his the button on his kappel was from the Bekisha of the Alter Rebbe. That's it's a Teitevis today. I suppose we should get Yantav to the Chabad Hasidim in the room.
What year did he write all this stuff?
This was written 1908, I believe. This was 1908. So he points out. He says, life is worth living if it is godly. Is not worth it. So we feel that. Klal Yisrael feels that. Now, he's personifying Klal Yisrael here, and we're going to talk about what that means to personify Klal Yisrael as a whole in a little bit. But he says like this. He says, Ella Elokim, Klal Yisrael as a collective knows that in truth there is no life that is not godly. It's not just that it's not worth it, it's not chayim. Now that notion of chayim we're going to explain in a minute. And this understanding, which is baked into the depths of the Jewish soul, imprints within us the unique seal, the unique imprint, that which is special to us. That is our identity on a national level. Hamutba al kol yochid biyochid michideha. This is an imprint, this is a stamp, a seal, a sign of every single Jew, because this is the nature of Klal Yisrael as a whole. Which means that the Klal as a whole, and this is important to understand the order that this goes in, this is not unique to each Jew. Klal Yisrael as a whole cannot live a life without being connected to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And therefore each prat within Klal Yisrael has no menuchas hanefesh, has no capacity to find meaning and rest and life without that, in as much as we are part of the Klal. So each prat is imprinted with this. Now, we'll just point out here that the notion of chaysam we speak about a lot Yom Noraim Tam. We talk about chasmeinu l'chai. What does it mean, a chasima? So, Shlomo Melech speaks about two chasimas. What are the two chasimas of Shlomo Melech? Chaysam al zre'echa and chaysam al libecha. There's a chaysam on our hands and a chaysam that is on our heart. There's two chasimas. There's a chasima of our activity, and there's a chasima, a seal of our emotions. What does it mean, chasima? So there's a beautiful Torah of the Derech HaMelech. The Derech HaMelech is the Eish Kedesh of Piazetzna. This was before the war. He wrote the Sefer Derech HaMelech. So there's a few Torahs that we have from Motzei Yom HaKippurim. This must be from 1935. 1935, he speaks about what does it mean, Chasmeinu l'chai Motzei Yom Kippur. So everybody thinks that what that means is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to write us and then he's going to seal us, right? He's going to close the book and seal the book. So he says that's not pshat. Say Kasvenu l'chaim means write us. Chasmeinu does not mean seal the thing that you wrote. Chasmeinu means seal us. What does it mean? Kechasam al zerecha, kechasam al libecha. So he says the way that a chasam works, the way that a seal, that a stamp works is, you have wax, you heat up the wax, and then you imprint it, right? And then you take out the seal, and then what's left is called the chasima, which bears the imprint of the thing that stamped us. That's a chasam. Chasam means that we bear the imprint of that which stamped us. Chasmeinu l'chaim, it means that the Rebbeinu Shalom should imprint us. L'chaim. Should imprint his chiyus within us. That we should bear that seal. Chasmeinu, that we are now sealed. We are the seal. We are imprinted with that chayim. And that's important here. He says every Jew has that. We are imprinted with that notion of what chiyus, of what life is. Because the light and the salvation of each individual the light and salvation, I'll translate the words and we'll explain. The light and salvation of each individual depends upon our knowledge and the deepening of that knowledge, and therefore the expression of that chaysam haklali hazeh, of that imprint of Klal Yisrael. Which means, for a Jew to reach our full potential, to experience life as it is supposed to be lived for us, each one of us, it depends upon how much we are expressing that which is part of our nature. The nature of a Jew is to bear upon us that seal, that chaysam, that recognition that we are only alive because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be alive. And that comes from our recognition that we are part of an ummah called Klal Yisrael, Knesset Yisrael. And in as much as we are living in accordance with that Ratzon Hashem that is expressed through creating Knesset Yisrael and me as a part within it, that is when my life takes on its greatest meaning. Now, to explain this very simply, al regel achas, Rav Kook writes in Ayah, and we learned this last year, 2 years ago, that everything is healthy when it is doing what it is designed to do. Sickness is an indication that something is malfunctioning. Things break down when they are not being used appropriately, which is why if you speak to anybody that works in the aviation industry, the best place for a plane to be is in the air. In the air. In the air. In the hangar, it rots and decays. Costs a lot of money to keep a plane in the hangar. Right? To keep it in the air, it costs money, but you make money from it. So it works out better. During all the shutdowns, you know where they parked all the planes? Middle of the Nevada desert. Because that was the place that was driest, that had no corrosion. Right. 100%. I mean, I'm saying, but like all the planes that were grounded for like indefinitely, they don't know what to do with them. They put them in the driest, loneliest places. Right. Because a plane out of commission. So the same thing is true, you know, if you use your car every day, so then Al Pi Rov, that when you get in your car in the morning, it'll turn on. The car that you only use once in a yovel, so you don't know, right? It's a shtickle shachris with kavana if the car's going to work when you put the key in, right? Because something that is operating according to the way that it's designed to operate, is operating. That's healthy. Sickness is as a result of something not operating the way that it's supposed to. So for a Jew to experience life as a Jew is supposed to experience life, says Rav Kook, the way that this works is, Kadosh Baruch Hu created something called Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael recognizes as a whole that life is meaningful only in as much as we are connected to the Rebbeinu Shalom. That we experience life as Klal Knesset Yisrael. And me as an individual, as a prat, I'm a Jew. There's no way of denying that. There's no taking away from that. The more that I move away from recognizing myself as a Jew and therefore seeing myself as having a tafkid within Klal Yisrael, the more that I move away from that, the less I will experience life as is natural for me to experience it. So you become a chayla. The system breaks down. It doesn't work. Which is why I had this conversation with an ultra reformed Jew a number of years ago. He was hacking me Chanik about something, and I was responding to him with what the din is. And then he says to me, Rabbi, my grandparents were Orthodox. So I said to him, I know. So he says to me, how do you know? I said, because if your grandparents were Reform, you wouldn't be Jewish. We wouldn't be having this conversation. Al Pi Rov, that's a reality. Now, that's a terrible tragedy, but it's also true. So he started to cry. He said to me, Rabbi, you're right, my grandchildren are not Jewish. So they're not. So I said to him, I said, you can argue with Yiddishkeit all you like. You can argue with Torah, you can argue with the Shulchan Aruch. You can fight these things. But one thing is very clear, that for Jews to operate in accordance with how we're supposed to operate, to continue living, to be part of this nitzchias, this eternity called Klal Yisrael, we need to be adherents of Torah and Mitzvahs. If we're not, then we're out of the running. That's just how it works. It's not my rules. That's the Teva Ha'olam. That's how Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world. Is that when things operate in accordance with the way that they're supposed to operate, they live. And when they don't operate the way that they're supposed to operate, they die. That's just the reality. That's how it works. Al Pi Rov, you see this throughout all of Jewish history, that factions even within Yiddishkeit that broke away from the Masorah, they're not there anymore. Sometimes it takes a long time. It took like 7 centuries for the Karaim to disappear. You know that? The Karaim that like showed up like, yeah, shkoyach, right? That's that Karaim shkoyach. You understand that Karaim were an alternative to Yiddishkeit, like in the days of Rav Sadia, just before the days of Rav Sadia. Right? But the Gaonim Karaim were like a real thing. It was like they were Jews and they were Karaim. It was like a whole, and they said, we're the real Jews. The Tzaddikim and the Karaim. But so sometimes something can live a long time without being connected to the Shorish. But then ultimately it dwindles, it dies, it dissipates, it falls apart. It doesn't work. So he says a Jew only lives in accordance with how much we understand that we're a Jew. We recognize that the value of our life is only in as much as it is connected to the Baruch Shalom. And we feel this in the deepest place of our souls. He says, this is pshat in the pasuk, V'atem hadveikim b'Hashem Elokeichem, chayim kulchem hayom. If we are connected to Hashem, we are chayim kulchem hayom. The more that we are connected to Hashem, the more we're chayim. Good? Take another minute. You see that? Okay. The more that we are connected to Hashem, the more that we are chayim. And the less that we are connected to the Rebbeinu Shalom, the less that we are chayim. This Nakuda is the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, and by Hashem Yisbarach, we will take a look at that next.